He slipped her a fake $1 bill to test her pride. Her quiet response made the billionaire stand speechless. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get started. In a bustling Manhattan cafe, where the rich and powerful often found solace, a young waitress named Anna worked tirelessly, unnoticed, and unremarkable to most. She wasn't the type to draw attention, her quiet demeanor blending seamlessly into the background of the busy restaurant. Her uniform, simple and clean, was nothing extraordinary, but her attitude was. Anna had always kept her head down, doing her job with a level of professionalism that few could match. She didn't seek praise or recognition. Her only concern was doing the best she could, day in and day out. Little did she know, today was going to be different. Enter Jack Anderson, a billionaire CEO known for his sharp business acumen and ruthless attitude. His company had just secured a massive deal, and to celebrate, he decided to dine at this small, upscale cafe. He wasn't looking for anything extraordinary, just a meal and a chance to unwind after a grueling week of negotiations. As he sat down at a table near the window, he observed the restaurant's staff moving with practiced ease, none of them catching his attention, except for one. Anna, with her calm, efficient movements, caught his eye. There was something about her quiet confidence, the way she handled herself without needing to speak much. Jack was used to people vying for his attention, but Anna seemed different. He wasn't sure why, but something about her made him want to test her, to see how far he could push before she cracked. He decided to make a game of it. As Anna approached his table to take his order, Jack slipped a $1 bill into her hand, watching her closely as she took it. It wasn't the typical tip, and certainly not one that a billionaire like him would give by accident. It was a test. He was curious to see how she would react. Would she notice the fake bill? Would she say something? Or would she keep quiet, as she had done before? Anna didn't flinch. She took the bill with the same professionalism she applied to everything else. She nodded politely and went about her work, leaving Jack to wonder if she would catch the mistake. Jack, thinking he had outsmarted her, leaned back in his chair, confident that his little test would reveal something about her character. What he didn't expect was what happened next. Anna returned to his table, her eyes calm but piercing, and placed the $1 bill on the edge of his plate. Without a word, she pointed to it and waited. Jack's heart skipped a beat. His confidence faltered. There was no anger in her eyes, no frustration, just a quiet understanding that he had underestimated her. "Is there a problem, sir?" she asked, her voice calm but firm, as if she had already known the answer. Jack opened his mouth to say something, but the words caught in his throat. The simple, unspoken challenge in her response left him speechless. He had expected to see pride, anger, or even humiliation, but instead, Anna had responded with grace, leaving him in a state of silent awe. This quiet waitress, with no need to prove herself, had made the billionaire reconsider his own actions. It was a moment of reckoning, and in that moment, Jack realized that the real power was not in testing others, but in understanding their quiet strength. As Jack sat in silence, staring at the $1 bill Anna had placed on his plate, the room seemed to fade away. His mind raced, trying to comprehend what had just happened. He was used to being in control of every situation, but this quiet waitress had completely thrown him off balance. It wasn't just the way she'd noticed the fake bill. It was the way she had carried herself with such quiet dignity, leaving him speechless. He could feel a weight settle in his chest, an unfamiliar feeling creeping into his thoughts. Anna had passed his test without a word, and yet, in doing so, she had taught him something far more valuable than any business deal or negotiation ever could. Her composure, her quiet strength, had made him question his own actions. She had responded without anger or humiliation, with nothing but the simple truth. She wasn't there to prove herself to him or anyone else. She was just doing her job, as she always had, but with a grace that few people, let alone a billionaire like him, could ever match. Jack shifted in his seat, his thoughts swirling as he continued to watch Anna work. He felt the need to understand her better, to figure out what made her so different from everyone else he had ever encountered. What was it about her that had stopped him in his tracks? He had tested her pride, expecting her to react with some form of anger or defensiveness, but instead, she had simply accepted the test, responded calmly, and moved on with her day. He had never met someone like her before. As Anna moved between tables, she continued to offer impeccable service, but this time, Jack was paying attention. He watched as she interacted with the other customers, polite, professional, and efficient. She had a natural way of making people feel at ease, of making them feel heard, and that was something Jack had never truly experienced in his own world. The people around him were always trying to impress him, to win his favor, but Anna didn't seem to care about that. She didn't need his approval. She wasn't interested in playing the game. Jack found himself fascinated by her. He had spent years building his empire, accumulating wealth and power, but what had it all been for? Was it just to prove to the world that he could outsmart everyone? Or was there more to life than that? Anna's response had struck a chord deep within him, forcing him to confront the emptiness of his own existence. As the night wore on, Jack couldn't stop thinking about the quiet waitress who had taken his test and turned it into a lesson for him. He knew he had to talk to her, to understand what made her tick. When the check arrived, Jack had already made up his mind. He would offer her something that would make her life easier, something he thought would be enough to make her respect him. He wasn't sure why he thought it would work, but in that moment, it felt like the right thing to do. As Anna placed the check on the table, Jack hesitated for a moment before speaking. "You know, I'm not the type to make offers lightly, but I think you deserve more than what this job gives you. I can offer you a consulting position in my company, something where your intelligence and grace could be put to use in ways that go beyond serving tables. You deserve more than to be stuck here, doing this." Anna's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, Jack saw something in them that surprised him, something like amusement. She didn't look shocked or impressed by his offer. Instead, she looked thoughtful. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice steady and calm. "But I'm perfectly fine where I am. This job is honest work, and I find value in it." Jack blinked, momentarily thrown off by her response. "You're turning down a chance to work with me?" he asked, a hint of disbelief in his voice. Anna simply nodded, her expression neutral. "I'm not interested in proving myself to anyone," she said quietly. "I'm here because I enjoy helping people, not because I want to climb some corporate ladder or impress anyone. I believe in finding dignity in whatever work you do, and right now, this is where I feel I can make the most difference." Jack sat back in his chair, stunned. He had expected her to jump at the chance, to be flattered by his offer. But instead, she had turned him down, not out of arrogance or disdain, but because she simply didn't need it. She was already content with the life she had chosen. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt a sense of humility wash over him. He had spent his life building walls, amassing wealth, and constantly trying to prove that he was the best. But in that moment, sitting in the quiet cafe with Anna, he realized how hollow that pursuit had been. "I see," he said softly, his voice filled with newfound respect. "I guess I have a lot to learn." Anna smiled, a quiet, genuine smile. "We all do," she said before turning to attend to another table. Jack sat there for a moment, letting her words sink in. She had shown him that true success wasn't about money or power. It was about being content with who you were, no matter where you were in life. And as the evening drew to a close, Jack left the cafe with a different perspective on what really mattered. As Jack left the cafe that evening, he couldn't shake the conversation he had with Anna. The offer, the simple grace with which she had rejected it, and the quiet strength she had shown had left a lasting impression on him. For someone who had spent his entire life building a fortune, it was a humbling experience. He was used to people seeking him out for opportunities, not turning them down with such ease. What was it about Anna that made her so different? What made her so sure of herself? Over the next few days, Jack found himself reflecting more and more on his encounter with her. He had returned to his hectic world of meetings, mergers, and billion-dollar deals, but in the back of his mind, Anna's words echoed. "I believe in finding dignity in whatever work you do." He hadn't been able to stop thinking about her response. It was a foreign concept to him. All his life, he had been taught that success was defined by wealth, power, and influence. But Anna, a simple waitress, had defined success in an entirely different way. She wasn't concerned with impressing anyone, with climbing the corporate ladder, or with earning millions. She simply wanted to do her job well and find meaning in the work itself. It was a lesson Jack had never learned, one that made him feel both inspired and, for the first time in a long while, inadequate. A week later, Jack returned to the cafe. It was a quiet afternoon, and the usual bustle of high-powered business people had yet to arrive. As he entered, the familiar clink of silverware and the hum of soft conversation filled the air. He spotted Anna immediately. She was working behind the counter, her back turned as she prepared a coffee for a customer. Jack hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach her. He had never been one to second-guess himself, but now, he found himself unsure of the next step. As if sensing his presence, Anna turned, her eyes meeting his with that same calm, steady gaze. "Good afternoon, Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice as professional as ever. Jack was struck by how effortless it seemed for her to carry herself with such poise. He couldn't help but feel a bit out of place. "Hi, Anna," he said, his voice a little softer than usual. "Mind if I sit down?" She nodded and gestured to the empty seat at the table. As he sat down, Jack found himself at a loss for words. This wasn't like any other meeting he had ever had. There was no agenda, no business deal to negotiate. It was just him and Anna, two people from entirely different worlds. "I've been thinking about what you said," Jack finally said, breaking the silence. "About dignity in work. It's something I've never really considered." Anna set down her coffee pot and looked at him curiously. "You don't think your work has dignity?" she asked, her tone gentle but pointed. Jack hesitated before answering. "I don't know. I've always thought about work in terms of success. How much money you make, how much power you have, what you can achieve. I never thought much about the dignity in it." Anna nodded thoughtfully, her eyes not judgmental, but rather filled with understanding. "You're not the first person to feel that way," she said quietly. "Most people in this city, in this world, think the same. But I've learned that dignity comes from the work itself, not the reward." Jack leaned back in his chair, absorbing her words. He had built his entire life on the pursuit of success, and yet, here was Anna, a woman who had no need to prove anything to anyone, telling him that success didn't mean what he thought it did. "I think I've been looking at life all wrong," Jack admitted, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. "I've been chasing something that doesn't matter, and I've neglected the things that really do." Anna gave him a small smile, one that didn't feel pitying, but rather kind. "It's not too late to change," she said softly. "You just have to want it." Jack felt something shift inside of him. For the first time in years, he felt like he was seeing the world through a different lens. The things that had once seemed so important, the money, the status, the power, now felt distant, almost meaningless. It wasn't that they didn't matter, but they weren't the only things that mattered. He had been so focused on achieving more, becoming more, that he had forgotten what it meant to simply be. "I want to learn," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I want to understand what you mean about dignity, about finding meaning in what you do." Anna's smile widened, and for a brief moment, Jack saw the kindness in her that had drawn him in from the start. "It's not something you can just learn overnight," she said. "But it's a journey, and I think you're ready for it." Jack left the cafe that day with a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in years. He knew his life was about to change, and he was ready to embrace it. As he stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, he felt a new sense of purpose. It wasn't about the deals, the mergers, or the millions. It was about something much simpler, something that Anna had taught him. It was about finding pride in the work itself, no matter what it was, and knowing that dignity came from within, not from the world's definition of success. As Jack woke up the next morning, he felt a strange sense of resolve. The conversation he had with Anna at the cafe had stayed with him long after he left. It wasn't just the words she spoke, but the way she lived them, the quiet confidence that radiated from her despite her modest job. He had spent the last few years focusing on power, on proving himself, on achieving more. But now, for the first time, he realized that maybe it wasn't about more. Maybe it was about finding meaning in what you already had. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was his assistant, asking if he was ready for a meeting that afternoon. Jack hesitated, the usual excitement he felt about closing deals no longer there. He had a meeting with an important client, but he didn't feel the same urgency he once did. He thought about Anna again. She had found dignity in her work, in helping others, and Jack wondered if he could do the same. He knew his world would never be the same, and maybe, just maybe, he was ready for something different. As he sat in his office later that day, the familiar hum of the corporate world surrounding him, Jack found his thoughts drifting. His assistant handed him a document for review, but he barely looked at it. Instead, his mind kept going back to Anna. And her words. What would it be like to live a life focused on meaning rather than success? He wasn't sure, but he was starting to feel like it was the life he wanted to explore. The meeting with the client went smoothly, as expected, but Jack couldn't help but feel disconnected from it all. The numbers, the deals, the pressure, it all seemed so far away now. He found himself asking questions he had never considered before. Was this really what he wanted? Or was he just trapped in a cycle of ambition that had become his identity? After the meeting, Jack made a decision. He would visit Anna again. He wanted to understand more about how she saw the world, about how she had learned to find pride in work that most people would overlook. It wasn't that he was giving up his business or his wealth, but he wanted to find balance, to reconnect with something more grounded, more real. That evening, Jack found himself back at the same cafe. The air was cool, the streets of Manhattan bustling with activity, but inside, the cafe was calm, almost serene. He spotted Anna immediately, as always, moving through the cafe with quiet efficiency. This time, there was no agenda in his mind. No test. No offers. He just wanted to talk. As Anna approached his table, she gave him a polite smile. "Good evening, Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice steady as always. "What can I get for you today?" Jack smiled back, feeling a warmth he hadn't expected. "Hi, Anna," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I don't need anything today. I just wanted to sit down and talk." Anna paused, her expression neutral but not unkind. "Talk?" she asked. Jack nodded. "Yeah, just talk. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about finding dignity in your work, and I wanted to learn more. I think I've been going about things all wrong, and I need to understand a different way of looking at life." Anna set down her order pad and took a seat across from him, her eyes thoughtful. "What made you change your mind?" she asked. Jack leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the table. "I've spent my whole life chasing success. Wealth, power, influence. Those were the things I thought mattered. But I've realized that I've been running after the wrong things. I've been missing the point. And I think you've found something I've been looking for, even if I didn't know it." Anna looked at him quietly, taking in his words. "It's not about giving up your ambitions, Jack," she said softly. "It's about finding balance. It's about doing what you do with purpose, not just for the sake of achieving more. It's about finding meaning in the work, no matter how small it might seem to others." Jack nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. "I get that now," he said, his voice filled with a new sense of understanding. "It's not about proving something to the world, or about what others think of you. It's about finding pride in what you do, regardless of what anyone else says." Anna smiled, the kind of smile that didn't come from pity or condescension, but from genuine understanding. "Exactly," she said quietly. "You don't have to be anyone else. You just have to be true to yourself in whatever you choose to do." Jack sat back in his chair, a feeling of peace settling over him. For the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path. Not a path that led to more wealth, more power, or more accolades, but a path that led to something far more important: understanding who he was and what really mattered in life. As he left the cafe that evening, Jack felt lighter, freer than he had in a long time. The weight of his past ambitions didn't disappear overnight, but he knew that he was ready to make changes. And this time, it wouldn't be for anyone else. It would be for him. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, he was ready to face it, not with the desire to conquer, but with the hope to connect. Jack had spent the last few weeks reflecting on the conversations he had with Anna. He had started making subtle changes in his life, taking moments to breathe, to reflect, and to shift his priorities. The hunger for more, the drive to achieve and conquer, was still there, but now it had a new purpose. Instead of being the sole focus of his life, it was simply a part of it. Anna's words had shifted something deep within him. He was learning that success wasn't just about accumulating wealth or climbing a never-ending ladder. It was about finding satisfaction in the journey, in the work itself, in the people you met along the way. That evening, after yet another grueling day filled with meetings and phone calls, Jack found himself back at the cafe, the same place where everything had changed. As he entered, he was greeted by the familiar buzz of conversation and the clink of plates. The cafe felt like a refuge from his busy, high-pressure life. It was simple, yet it had a warmth he had never realized he needed. He spotted Anna almost immediately, her eyes scanning the room as she took orders with a quiet efficiency. Jack felt a deep sense of gratitude toward her for unknowingly guiding him toward this new chapter in his life. He made his way to the counter, where she was handing a coffee to a customer. When Anna saw him, she gave him the same polite smile, but this time, there was something different in her gaze. There was no forced politeness, no detached professionalism. There was just a simple acknowledgement, a quiet understanding between them. "Good evening, Mr. Anderson," Anna said as she placed the coffee down. "How can I help you today?" Jack smiled, his voice warm. "Actually, Anna, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About dignity, about doing work with purpose. And I wanted to ask you something." Anna raised an eyebrow slightly, her expression intrigued but calm. "What's on your mind?" Jack leaned in slightly, feeling a nervousness he hadn't experienced in a long time. "I've been wondering, do you ever think about doing something else? Something bigger? I mean, you've got a lot of knowledge and wisdom. You could probably do anything you wanted. Have you ever thought about going after that?" Anna considered him for a moment, her face unreadable. Jack, sensing her hesitation, quickly added, "I just think you have so much more to offer the world. You're so much more than just a waitress." Anna smiled, but this time it was different. It wasn't the polite smile he was used to. It was real, gentle, almost like she was humoring him. "I appreciate that, Mr. Anderson. But I'm exactly where I need to be," she said quietly. "This job, this cafe, it's where I can make a difference, where I can connect with people. In a way that matters. I don't need more to feel fulfilled." Jack was taken aback. He had expected her to express some desire for a bigger life, some kind of ambition. Instead, she had done the opposite. She had reaffirmed the very thing he was struggling with. "You know," Anna continued, "it's easy to get caught up in the idea that more is always better, that you need to prove something, to be something grander. But when you stop looking for more, when you learn to appreciate what you have, that's when you find peace." Jack sat back, his mind racing. He had thought he was the one who would have the answers for her, offering her opportunities, but instead, Anna was giving him a perspective he hadn't even considered. A peace that came from within. "I'm sorry if I sounded like I was pushing you," Jack said, his voice tinged with self-awareness. "I guess I've been so focused on what's next that I forgot to appreciate what's right in front of me." Anna looked at him, her eyes softening. "It's not about pushing forward all the time. It's about balance. Knowing when to strive, and knowing when to be content. We all need both." Jack thought about her words long after he left the cafe. He couldn't deny the truth in them. He had spent his life running, pushing for more, never taking a moment to just breathe, to be content. He didn't need to be anyone else. He didn't need to keep proving his worth. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to find peace in what he had already accomplished. Over the next few weeks, Jack made a concerted effort to slow down. He took time off from his relentless schedule to spend with friends, to enjoy the simpler things in life, and to reconnect with himself. He even visited the cafe more often, not to make deals or ask for favors, but simply to be present. Anna's quiet wisdom had become his compass. It wasn't about abandoning his goals, but about recalibrating his approach, finding joy in the journey rather than obsessing over the destination. One day, as Jack sat in the cafe, sipping his coffee and watching the hustle and bustle around him, he realized something. He had found a new definition of success. It wasn't about power. It wasn't about wealth. It was about finding fulfillment in the present moment, in the work that truly mattered. Jack smiled to himself, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He had finally found peace, and it was in the most unexpected place, a small cafe in the heart of the city. As Jack sat at his desk the following week, surrounded by paperwork and the constant buzz of his phone, he couldn't help but feel a sense of disconnection from it all. His company, once the very heart of his existence, now seemed like just another part of his life, one that was no longer his sole focus. Instead, his thoughts kept drifting back to the cafe, to Anna, and to the lessons she had unwittingly taught him about life and work. He knew he had changed, but he also knew there was more to this transformation. It wasn't just about slowing down or reflecting. It was about embracing a new way of living that felt more true to himself. It was about balance. It was about finding peace in the midst of the chaos. That afternoon, he decided to visit the cafe again. It had become a place of clarity for him, a sanctuary where he could think, reflect, and recalibrate his perspective. When he arrived, the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. The cafe was busy as usual, the soft chatter of patrons creating a comforting hum. He spotted Anna behind the counter, her back turned as she prepared drinks. She moved with the same quiet efficiency he had come to admire, a stark contrast to the frenetic pace he had once embraced. Jack took a seat near the window, his gaze drifting over the bustling city outside. His mind wandered as he thought about how he had spent so many years chasing an elusive ideal of success. Now, sitting in the cafe, he realized how much of his life he had missed by focusing solely on the end goal, without ever appreciating the journey. As Anna approached his table with a warm smile, Jack felt a sense of gratitude wash over him. "Good afternoon, Mr. Anderson," she greeted him, her voice steady and calm. "What can I get for you today?" Jack smiled, his eyes meeting hers. "Actually, Anna, I just wanted to sit down and talk again. If you have a moment." Anna raised an eyebrow, her expression curious but not surprised. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Jack took a deep breath, knowing this conversation would be different from their previous ones. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about finding meaning in what you do, no matter how small it seems. It's something I've struggled with for a long time. For years, my life was about more success, more deals, more everything. But now, I'm starting to wonder if that's enough. I'm wondering if I've been chasing the wrong things." Anna sat down across from him, her posture relaxed, her expression understanding. "It's not about what you have, Jack," she said softly. "It's about how you live, what you give to the world. I've seen so many people run after wealth, after status, after the next big thing. But when you stop and look at the simple things, you realize that those are the things that truly matter." Jack nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He had spent so many years caught up in the pursuit of things that, in the end, hadn't made him feel any more fulfilled. Now, as he listened to Anna, he realized that success wasn't just about accumulating wealth. It was about finding fulfillment in the work you did, the people you met, and the connections you made. "I think I've been running in the wrong direction all these years," Jack said, his voice quiet. "I've been trying to build an empire, but now I wonder if I've missed out on what really matters. I've neglected the people around me, and I've been so focused on the next big deal that I forgot to stop and appreciate the present." Anna smiled gently, her eyes soft with empathy. "It's easy to get caught up in that," she said. "The world pushes us to keep striving, to always want more. But there's something beautiful about just being present, about taking time to enjoy the little things." Jack looked at her, a new sense of clarity forming in his mind. "I don't think I ever really knew what it meant to enjoy the little things," he said thoughtfully. "I was always chasing something bigger, thinking that would bring me happiness. But now, I'm starting to see that maybe happiness isn't about what you achieve. Maybe it's about what you experience along the way." Anna's smile deepened, and she nodded. "Exactly," she said softly. "Happiness comes from living a life that's true to who you are, not from what others expect of you, or what society tells you to chase. It comes from finding purpose in the small moments, in the things that really matter." Jack sat back in his chair, his thoughts swirling. He had spent so much of his life focused on the end goal, thinking that reaching the top would bring him fulfillment. But now, as he sat in the cafe, talking to Anna, he realized that the journey itself, everything he had overlooked along the way, was what truly mattered. It wasn't about the power, the money, or the success. It was about the relationships he built, the moments he shared, and the work he did with purpose. As he left the cafe later that afternoon, Jack felt lighter. He knew his journey was far from over, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He didn't need to keep running after more. He simply needed to be present, to embrace the life he had, and to find meaning in everything he did. The weight of ambition still lingered, but it no longer defined him. It was just one part of his life, and he was ready to explore the rest. The following weeks after his meeting with Anna, Jack found himself spending more time reflecting on his life than ever before. He had started integrating the lessons she taught him, slowly but surely. At first, it had been difficult. His instincts told him to push forward, to continue building his empire, to go after the next deal, but something had shifted inside him. He began to realize that his drive for more was a mask for something deeper, something that hadn't been addressed. He needed to slow down, to look at the world around him, and to find meaning in the things he had already achieved, rather than endlessly seeking the next milestone. One evening, Jack found himself walking through the city streets, his thoughts drifting back to Anna. Her wisdom and quiet confidence had left a lasting impact on him. He had begun to understand that success was more than just the accolades and wealth. It was about how you lived, how you treated people, and what you contributed to the world around you. He wanted to know more. Jack had realized something else. He hadn't been living his life in the way he wanted. He had been living according to a script written by others, by the pressures of society, by the need to impress people, and by his own internal expectations. But after speaking with Anna, he understood that it was time for him to write his own story. That night, he decided to take a step forward. He returned to the cafe where everything had changed for him, hoping to talk more with Anna. As he entered, he felt the familiar warmth of the place. The soft chatter of customers, the clinking of mugs, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee welcomed him. He looked around, hoping to catch a glimpse of Anna. There she was, behind the counter, her face serene as she helped a customer. Jack walked up to the counter, his heart beating a little faster. Anna looked up and smiled when she saw him. "Good evening, Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice calm and friendly. "What can I get for you today?" Jack smiled back, feeling a sense of ease he hadn't expected. "Hi, Anna. I'm just here to talk again, if you have some time." Anna's eyes softened, and she nodded. "Of course. I have a few minutes." She stepped over to his table, her usual grace in every movement. As she sat down across from him, Jack felt a sense of comfort. He was no longer the high-powered CEO trying to make deals. Now, he was just a man trying to understand himself. "I've been thinking about a lot of things since we last talked," Jack began, his voice steady. "And I've realized something important. I've spent my whole life running after things I thought would make me happy. But now, I understand that it's not about what I have or what I achieve. It's about how I live my life and the people I connect with along the way." Anna listened quietly, her expression thoughtful. Jack continued, "You were right when you said that true happiness comes from within, not from external success. I've been chasing something that was never really mine to catch. It's been an exhausting race." Anna nodded, her gaze steady. "It's easy to get caught up in the race. Everyone around us is chasing something, and we forget that there's a world beyond the finish line." Jack looked at her, his eyes filled with a new understanding. "I've been so focused on reaching the top, on building this empire, that I've missed out on the things that matter. I didn't realize until now that there's more to life than just winning." Anna smiled gently, her voice warm. "The point of life isn't the destination, Jack. It's about the journey, the people you meet along the way, and the meaning you find in what you do. Life isn't about collecting trophies. It's about living with purpose." Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders as her words settled in. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of clarity. He didn't have to keep running, striving, or constantly seeking approval. He just needed to live authentically, to embrace the present, and to find peace in the work he did, no matter how big or small. "I've been afraid to slow down, afraid that if I do, I'll lose everything I've built," Jack admitted. "But now, I see that I don't have to choose between success and peace. I can have both, just not in the way I thought I would." Anna's smile deepened, and she nodded. "That's right. Life isn't about choosing between two extremes. It's about finding balance. You can have success, but it doesn't have to consume you. You can be at peace, but it doesn't mean you have to stop moving forward. It's all about perspective." Jack sat back in his chair, taking in her words. He realized she had given him the most valuable lesson of all, not how to become more successful, but how to live a meaningful life. The world would always demand more, but it was up to him to decide how much of himself he was willing to give. He had spent too many years living for others, meeting their expectations and chasing their idea of success. But now, he was ready to live for himself. As he stood up to leave, Jack felt a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in years. He thanked Anna before heading out the door, but this time, he wasn't walking toward a meeting, a deal, or a deadline. He was simply walking toward his future, whatever that looked like. He had no idea where it would take him, But for the first time, he was okay with that. The only thing that mattered was that he was finally living his life on his terms. As weeks passed, Jack began to make small but significant changes in his daily routine. He still held meetings, still ran his company, but his approach had shifted. No longer was he driven by the relentless pursuit of wealth or status. Instead, he found himself focusing more on the moments, the interactions, and the deeper purpose behind his work. He even started spending more time at the cafe, where his perspective had first started to change. Each visit felt like a reminder that there was more to life than the race he had been running. One chilly afternoon, Jack sat at a corner table, sipping his coffee and watching the world outside. The city's constant motion reminded him of the life he had once lived, always chasing something, always trying to stay ahead. But now, he saw the beauty in slowing down, in appreciating the quiet moments, and in being present. Anna had become an anchor for him, not in the sense of her offering answers, but in the way she embodied the calm he had been searching for. She didn't need the world to acknowledge her worth. She didn't need approval or recognition. And yet, in her quiet way, she commanded respect and attention. Jack admired that strength, and with each passing day, he found himself wanting to learn more from her. One afternoon, as the cafe buzzed with its usual mix of chatter and clinking dishes, Anna came over to his table with her usual warm smile. "How's everything today?" she asked, setting down a fresh cup of coffee. Jack smiled back, feeling a sense of peace that had become more familiar to him. "Good, really good actually. I've been thinking a lot about what you've taught me." Anna raised an eyebrow, her expression both curious and reserved. "I've learned to look at things differently," Jack continued. "I used to believe that success meant achieving more, making more, and accumulating things. But now, I'm starting to see that it's not about more. It's about living in a way that's true to who you are and making sure the things you do bring value, not just to you, but to others as well." Anna listened intently, her gaze steady. "That's a big shift," she said softly. "Most people are so focused on getting ahead that they miss the value in what they already have." Jack nodded, the weight of her words settling in. "Exactly. I've spent so much of my life chasing things that I thought would make me happy. But it turns out that real happiness comes from living with intention and appreciating what you already have." Anna smiled, and for a moment, Jack could see the quiet wisdom in her that had always been there. "You've made a good realization," she said. "It's not easy to change your mindset, especially when society constantly tells you that you need more. But when you start living with purpose, everything else follows naturally." Jack took a deep breath, his thoughts now more grounded than they had ever been. "I've been thinking about my work, too," he said. "I've always been focused on building my empire, but I'm starting to realize that it's not just about the empire. It's about the impact I have, the people I work with, and the way I lead." Anna's eyes softened. "It's easy to get lost in the idea of an empire, but what really matters is how you treat the people who help you build it." Jack felt a deep sense of clarity in her words. He had always prided himself on his business acumen, but now he understood that leadership was not just about making decisions or closing deals. It was about building relationships, understanding people, and creating a culture of respect and dignity. "I think that's what I've been missing all along," Jack said. "I've been so focused on the bottom line that I forgot about the people who helped me get there. I've neglected to lead with empathy and understanding. But that's the kind of leader I want to be." Anna smiled, the kind of smile that spoke volumes without words. "You're on the right path," she said. Jack sat back in his chair, feeling lighter than he had in years. He didn't know where this new path would lead, but for the first time, he was okay with that. He didn't need to have all the answers. He didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to be present, to lead with purpose, and to appreciate the journey rather than obsessing over the destination. As he finished his coffee and stood up to leave, Jack felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for so long. The weight of ambition still lingered, but it no longer defined him. He had found a new kind of success, a success that came from within, from the way he chose to live his life and the way he connected with others. And as he walked out into the crisp autumn air, Jack knew that he had made the right decision. He wasn't in control of everything, but he was in control of how he responded, of how he chose to lead and live. And that, he realized, was all that mattered. Over the next few months, Jack's life continued to transform in ways he had never anticipated. He found himself embracing the changes he had made and seeing the world in a completely different light. His company, which had once consumed his every waking moment, no longer defined him. Instead, he became more focused on building meaningful relationships with his employees, creating a work environment that encouraged personal growth and mutual respect. He realized that real success wasn't measured by the size of his bank account or the number of zeros in his paycheck. It was about the impact he had on the people around him, the connections he made, the trust he built, and the lives he touched. Jack's business meetings, once filled with high-pressure discussions and competitive posturing, now had a different tone. He no longer felt the need to dominate every conversation or force his will upon others. Instead, he listened. He took the time to understand the perspectives of those around him, from his employees to his clients. He made it a point to ask about their lives, their struggles, and their dreams. For the first time in a long time, Jack found himself genuinely interested in the people he worked with, not just as employees or business partners, but as human beings. The results were nothing short of remarkable. His company thrived in ways that went beyond financial success. Employee morale improved, turnover decreased, and creativity flourished. People felt valued, and that translated into better work, more innovation, and stronger collaboration. It was as if the business had finally become a reflection of the person Jack had become. One afternoon, Jack was sitting in his office when his assistant came in with a message. It was an invitation to a charity event, one that Anna had organized. Jack had heard about the event from her a few weeks ago, but he hadn't expected to be invited. She had mentioned it in passing, talking about how important it was to her to give back to the community, but Jack hadn't thought much of it at the time. Now, here it was, an invitation addressed to him personally. He smiled as he read the message. Anna had been a quiet influence on him, and now he realized how much he wanted to support her in her endeavors. She had shown him what true leadership was about, and he wanted to do the same for her. He made the decision then and there to attend the event. It wasn't about networking or making deals. It was about showing up, supporting her, and being a part of something that mattered. That evening, Jack arrived at the event. It was being held in a modest community center, far from the glamorous venues he was used to attending. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, with colorful decorations and the sounds of people laughing and talking. As he walked through the door, he was greeted by Anna, who was busy organizing the event but still managed to make time for a quick conversation. "I'm glad you could make it," she said, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. Jack smiled, feeling a sense of belonging that he hadn't expected. "I wouldn't miss it," he replied. As the night unfolded, Jack found himself immersed in the cause. It was a charity aimed at helping underprivileged children gain access to education and opportunities they otherwise wouldn't have had. Anna spoke passionately about the importance of giving back, and Jack listened, captivated by her dedication and conviction. He realized that she had been doing more than just managing a cafe. She had been making a real difference in the world, and he had been blind to it for so long. By the end of the evening, Jack had made several new connections, but it wasn't about the business relationships. It was about the genuine conversations, the shared moments, and the realization that life wasn't about what you could take from the world, but what you could give to it. On his way home that night, Jack reflected on how far he had come. He had once been consumed by the need to be more, to do more, to achieve more. But now, he understood that the true measure of a person's worth wasn't in what they had, but in how they treated others and the impact they had on the world around them. As he pulled into his driveway, Jack knew that he was finally on the path he had been meant to walk all along. It wasn't the path of endless ambition or self-serving goals. It was the path of giving, of living with purpose, and of finding fulfillment in the journey itself. And as he stood at the door of his home, he felt a quiet sense of peace settle over him. He wasn't the man he used to be, and for the first time in his life, he was content with that. Months passed, and Jack continued to integrate the lessons he had learned from Anna into every aspect of his life. His company, while still thriving, had become less of an obsession and more of a platform for creating positive change. The pressures he had once felt to constantly achieve, to push forward relentlessly, began to feel distant. He no longer measured his worth by the size of his wealth or the scope of his business empire. Instead, he began to see value in the people he worked with and the impact he could have on the world around him. As he sat in his office one afternoon, he thought about how different things were now. The meetings no longer felt like a race. There was no anxiety pushing him to impress, no desperate need to prove himself. He could make decisions with a clearer mind, knowing that his actions would be guided not by a desire to conquer, but by a desire to contribute. Jack thought back to the charity event Anna had invited him to. It had been a turning point in his life, a reminder that real wealth wasn't measured by money or power, but by how you used your position to help others. He had left that evening feeling more connected to his purpose than he had ever felt before. As Jack leaned back in his chair, contemplating the future, a knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. His assistant entered, holding a stack of papers. "Mr. Anderson, there's someone here to see you," she said. "They didn't have an appointment, but I think you'll want to hear what they have to say." Jack looked up, curious. "Send them in," he said. Moments later, a familiar face entered his office. It was Anna. She was wearing her usual warm smile, but there was something different about her this time. She looked a little more polished, a little more confident, but still as grounded and real as ever. "Anna," Jack said, standing up to greet her. "What brings you here?" "I wanted to talk to you about something," she said, taking a seat across from him. "I've been thinking about the work you've been doing with your company. You've really made a difference, Jack. I see it in the way you approach business now, the way you lead." Jack smiled, feeling a swell of pride at her words. "Thank you, Anna. That means a lot coming from you. You've made a real impact, Jack," she said. "But I think there's something more you could do. Something bigger." Jack leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Anna took a deep breath. "I've been working on a project of my own, one that focuses on helping underserved communities get access to the same opportunities that those in wealthier areas take for granted. But to make it really work, I need someone with your expertise, your resources." Jack's interest piqued. "You want me to help with the project?" he asked. Anna nodded. "Yes, I think you're in a unique position to make a real difference. You have the business knowledge, the connections, and the ability to get things done. But more importantly, you have the heart for it. I've seen that in the way you've changed. And I think together, we can create something truly impactful." Jack sat back in his chair, processing her words. This wasn't just a business opportunity. It was something that aligned with everything he had been working toward, something that could bring him the fulfillment he had been searching for. He had spent years building his empire. But now, the thought of using his resources to help others seemed like a much more worthwhile pursuit. "I'm in," he said, his voice firm. "Let's do it. What do you need from me?" Anna's face lit up. "You have no idea how much this means, Jack. I believe in this, and I believe in you." Over the next few months, Jack worked closely with Anna on her project. They teamed up to launch an initiative that provided underprivileged communities with educational resources, job training, and mentorship. Jack used his business acumen to secure funding and partnerships, while Anna brought her passion and knowledge of the communities to the table. It wasn't long before their efforts began to pay off. The initiative gained traction, and people from all over the city began to take notice. Jack felt a sense of pride that he hadn't experienced before. For the first time, he wasn't just building something for his own gain. He was helping to build something that would leave a lasting legacy for others. As the project grew, Jack realized that the true success wasn't in the profits or the accolades. It was in the lives they were changing, the futures they were shaping. One afternoon, as he and Anna walked through one of the community centers they had helped establish, Jack stopped and looked at her. "You were right," he said quietly. "This is what it's all about." Anna smiled, her eyes warm. "I think you've known it all along, Jack. You just needed to find your way here." Jack nodded, a feeling of contentment settling over him. He had found his way. He had found a new purpose. And as he looked at the faces of the people whose lives had been changed, he knew that this was only the beginning. There was so much more he could do. And this time, he was going to do it not for himself, but for the world around him. As the months went by, Jack found himself more and more immersed in the work with Anna. Their project, which had started as a simple idea, was now a full-fledged initiative with growing impact. The community centers were thriving, offering valuable resources and support to those who needed it most. They were making real change, one person at a time. Jack had never felt so fulfilled. There was a profound sense of satisfaction that came from knowing his efforts were helping others, and he realized he had found something far more meaningful than the success he had once craved. For the first time in his life, he felt that he was living with purpose. Yet, despite the success of their project, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something missing. He had changed so much over the past months, And while he felt more connected to his work and the people around him, there was a part of him that still felt disconnected. His thoughts turned inward as he walked through the community center one afternoon. He had spent so much time focusing on helping others that he hadn't paid attention to his own needs. The work with Anna, the changes in his business, everything had been centered on giving back. But Jack knew he couldn't give fully unless he also took care of himself. He had to confront the part of him that had been buried, the part of him that was still searching for something more. That evening, Jack sat in his office, a rare moment of quiet settling over him. The city outside was alive with activity, but inside his space, he found a sense of stillness. He thought about the person he had become, someone who was no longer defined by the drive to accumulate wealth, but by the desire to make a positive impact. Yet, there was a question lingering in the back of his mind. What did he truly want from his life now? He had spent years pushing himself to the limits, trying to prove his worth to the world, but now he realized that he didn't need to prove anything anymore. The pursuit of more, whether more money, more deals, or more success, had lost its meaning. He had achieved more than he could have ever imagined, but the emptiness he had once felt remained, until he began to shift his focus. The shift had led him to something more fulfilling, but it had also brought new challenges. As he sat at his desk, Jack realized that he needed to take a step back, not just in his work, but in his life as a whole. He had been so consumed with external expectations that he had neglected his internal world. He had to reconnect with his own desires, his own dreams, without the weight of society's definitions of success. The next day, Jack called Anna. "I think it's time I take a break," he said, his voice calm but determined. "I've been so focused on the work and on giving back, but I think I need to step away for a while and figure things out for myself." Anna listened quietly before responding. "I think that's a wise decision, Jack," she said. "Sometimes we get so caught up in what we're doing for others that we forget to take care of ourselves. But taking a break isn't a step back, it's a step forward. It's about understanding what you truly need." Jack smiled, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. "Thanks, Anna. I've learned so much from you. About purpose. About balance. I think now it's time to find my own way." As Jack took time off from work, he spent his days reflecting on everything he had experienced over the past months. He traveled to places he had always wanted to see, but never had the time for. He spent time with old friends, reconnecting with people who had been important in his life. He spent hours reading, exploring ideas that had nothing to do with business or wealth. It was during this time of reflection that Jack realized something important. He had been searching for fulfillment in external achievements, but true fulfillment came from within. He didn't need to keep chasing the next big thing. He needed to reconnect with himself, to honor his own needs and desires, and to find peace in his own life. A few months later, Jack returned to the cafe, a place that had been the catalyst for his transformation. As he entered, Anna was there, as always, working with the same calm efficiency. She looked up when she saw him, and a small smile appeared on her face. "Welcome back, Jack," she said. "How have you been?" Jack took a deep breath, feeling at peace. "I've been good," he said, his voice steady. "I've had some time to think, time to focus on myself. I realized that there's more to life than work. It's about balance. It's about finding fulfillment in the little things, and it's about living with intention." Anna nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "I'm glad to hear that. Sometimes, we all need to step back and reevaluate our lives. It's not always about the hustle. It's about knowing when to rest, when to reflect, and when to move forward." Jack smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for everything he had learned from her. "I couldn't have come to this conclusion without you," he said. "Thank you for showing me what really matters." Anna's smile deepened. "You did the work, Jack. You just needed to see it for yourself." As Jack left the cafe that day, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just someone chasing success. He was someone living with intention, someone who understood that true fulfillment came from within. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Jack felt ready to face whatever came his way. He knew that it wasn't about achieving more. It was about living more fully, with balance and purpose. Months passed, and Jack's life took on a rhythm he hadn't expected. The time he had spent away from the fast pace of his company had allowed him to reconnect with the parts of himself he had ignored for years. His business had been stable, but Jack now approached it with a level of calm he had never had before. He was no longer driven by the constant need to succeed for the sake of success. Now, he sought fulfillment in the work he did, in the relationships he built, and in the way he contributed to the world around him. He hadn't given up on his company, but his priorities had shifted. His new purpose was clear: make a difference, lead with empathy, and find joy in the journey. One day, Jack found himself at the cafe again. It had become a sanctuary for him, a place where he could think, reflect, and recharge. He no longer saw it as just a place to visit. It was where he felt he had begun to change. As he walked in, the familiar sights and sounds greeted him. The chatter of customers, the clink of dishes, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Everything felt warm, inviting, and full of life. He saw Anna behind the counter, her face calm and focused as she prepared drinks. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "Hi, Jack," she said, her voice gentle and welcoming. "It's good to see you again." "It's good to be back," Jack replied with a smile. "I've been thinking a lot about everything we've talked about. I'm still learning, but I think I'm on the right track now." Anna's eyes softened. "I'm glad to hear that. It's not always an easy journey, but it's one worth taking." Jack sat down at a table near the window, looking out at the busy city outside. He realized that, for the first time in his life, he was no longer focused on the future in the same way. It wasn't about what was coming next. It was about being present, being content with where he was, and appreciating the small moments that made life meaningful. As he sat there, he thought about how far he had come. He had once been consumed by his need for more wealth, more success, more recognition. But now, those things felt distant. He had found something that mattered more: balance, peace, and the sense of connection that came from doing work that had meaning. Anna brought him his coffee, setting it down gently in front of him. "I've noticed a change in you, Jack," she said, taking a seat across from him. "You seem lighter, like you've let go of a lot of the things that used to weigh you down." Jack nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "I think you're right. I've learned that it's okay to let go of the need to be constantly striving for more. The more I focus on the people around me, on the things that matter in the present, the less I feel like I have to prove to the world." Anna smiled, her expression thoughtful. "That's a powerful realization. Most people spend their whole lives chasing something, never realizing that what they really need is right in front of them." Jack sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on her words. He had been chasing success for so long, thinking that it would bring him fulfillment. But now, he understood that fulfillment didn't come from external achievements. It came from within, from aligning his work with his values, and from being true to himself. "I've been thinking about the future," Jack said, his voice thoughtful. "I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I'm excited about it. I've learned that life doesn't have to be about always moving forward. It's about being present, making a difference in the lives of others, and finding meaning in every step." Anna nodded. "That's exactly it. When you let go of the need to control everything, you open yourself up to what really matters. The future will come, but it's the present that shapes it." Jack smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. For the first time, he wasn't worried about what was next. He didn't have a clear plan for the future, but he knew that he was headed in the right direction. It wasn't about the destination anymore. It was about the journey, and about living each day with intention and purpose. He looked out the window again, watching as the world outside continued to move at its usual pace. It was a reminder that life was constantly in motion, but that didn't mean he had to keep running. He could walk, enjoy the view, and find joy in each step along the way. As Jack finished his coffee, he stood up and smiled at Anna. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. "For everything." Anna smiled back, her eyes warm. "It's been a pleasure to watch you grow, Jack. I'm glad we met when we did." Jack left the cafe that day with a sense of fulfillment that he had never experienced before. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in his life, he was ready to face them with a sense of calm and clarity. The future was uncertain, but he was no longer afraid of it. He had learned that the key to happiness wasn't in achieving more. It was in being true to who you were and finding meaning in the present. And that, he realized, was enough. As Jack walked through the city streets one cool morning, he couldn't help but smile. The world seemed different to him now, not just because of the changes he had made, but because of the way he had learned to see it. He had found peace in places he had once overlooked, and he had discovered a deeper sense of purpose in the work he did, both in his company and in his life. The journey that had begun with Anna's words about dignity and purpose had brought him here, standing in the middle of a bustling city, feeling grounded and at ease. There was no urgency to reach the next milestone. He didn't need to rush. Life, as he had learned, was about taking the time to enjoy the moments in between. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and Jack pulled it out to see a message from Anna. He smiled, knowing that their collaboration had only strengthened their bond, both professionally and personally. Anna had been an incredible partner in their community project, and their work together had made a tangible difference. As he read the message, he felt a surge of gratitude for the journey they had shared. She had sent him an update about a new initiative they were about to launch, one that would further expand their efforts to bring education and opportunity to underserved communities. It had always been Anna's dream to create a lasting impact, and Jack realized that it was now his dream too. His earlier hesitations had faded. He knew now that this was where he was meant to be. The question of what came next in his life no longer seemed daunting. It felt right. He had learned that life wasn't just about the big moments. It was about the little things, the conversations, the connections, and the quiet moments of reflection. He had stopped seeking external validation and had instead learned to appreciate the life he was already living. His relationship with Anna had grown stronger over time, not because they were trying to change each other, but because they had both embraced the idea of growth in their own unique ways. Jack knew that their work together wasn't just about giving back. It was about creating something that would last long after they were gone. He had learned that success wasn't defined by what you had, but by what you left behind. That afternoon, Jack went to the cafe, a place that had become symbolic of his transformation. He hadn't visited in a while, but today, it felt like the right time. As he entered, the familiar warmth enveloped him. The clink of coffee cups, the hum of conversations, and the comforting smell of freshly brewed coffee all reminded him of how far he had come. He saw Anna behind the counter, greeting customers with the same warmth and kindness that had first captured his attention. When she saw him, her face lit up. "Jack, it's good to see you," she said, her voice calm and genuine. "I was just thinking about you." Jack smiled. "I was thinking about you too," he replied, taking a seat at the counter. "I'm proud of everything we've accomplished together." Anna set a cup of coffee in front of him and leaned against the counter, her eyes soft. "I couldn't have done it without you, Jack. You've helped me build something that truly matters. I think we've both learned a lot from each other." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "It's been an incredible journey," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "But the real reward has been in the impact we've made, in the lives we've touched. That's what I'll carry with me moving forward." Anna smiled, her expression content. "You've come a long way, Jack, and I'm glad I got to be part of that journey." Jack looked around the cafe, taking in the familiar sights. This place, once just a stop on his busy days, had become a symbol of his growth, of the changes he had made both inside and out. It wasn't just about the community work or the projects they had launched together. It was about the way his life had shifted. He had stopped chasing, stopped running. And in doing so, he had found a deeper connection to the world around him. It wasn't about the next business deal or the next step up the ladder. It was about finding meaning in the work he did, in the relationships he built, and in the small moments that made life so rich. Jack realized that this was just the beginning. There was still so much more he wanted to do, but for the first time, he wasn't focused on the destination. He was focused on the path, on the journey, and on the people he would continue to meet along the way. As he stood up to leave the cafe that day, he felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. He wasn't perfect, and there were still challenges ahead, but he knew he was on the right path. He was living in alignment with his values, and that was enough. The future would unfold, as it always does, but Jack was no longer afraid of it. He had learned that life wasn't about reaching the top. It was about living fully, embracing each step of the journey, and making a difference along the way. With that realization, Jack stepped out into the world, ready for whatever came next, knowing that he had already found what truly mattered.